If I ask you the question, which Navigator is better, Miku or Ange? Most of you is gonna answer, Ange is gonna be better for 3 turn DPS and Miku is gonna be better for 2 turn DPS. While in a vacuum, that makes a lot of sense. However, in practice, that is not always true. There are more factors than just 2 turn or 3 turn DPS. So in this video, I will try my best to explain when or how do you use both Navigators. And of course, I'll also compare them side by side. Which one is better for what DPS, or at least for the ones that I've tested. But before we begin, I want to apologize for something. First thing is that, well, I think it's been 2 weeks since I last uploaded a P5X video. This is because I was busy testing Miku. That took like 2 weeks, a lot of testing across like 3 weeks of bosses. And the second thing I want to apologize for is that I initially wanted to do 4 videos on Miku. The first one, which hopefully you already saw, was a Miku first impression video. The second video is this one, which is going to be Ange and Miku. The third one is going to be about A1 and A2 Miku. And the final one is supposed to be a rotation guide for Miku. But due to lack of time, I will be scrapping that video. But don't worry, because I kinda infused that video into both this video and next video. As in, I'll give you some guides on the rotation and I'll also show you a lot, and I mean a lot of rotations, to hopefully give you an idea on how to use them properly. So I think we should first begin with what makes them different. How is Miku different from Ange? Because if you don't know the difference, then you don't really know like when to use them. So the first difference for Hatsune Miku is that she has a weakness buff. It's from the Spring Storm skill 2. That's the first difference. But this has a catch, and it's that your DPS needs to hit the weakness, obviously. The second difference, which is a rather big one, is that Ange has way more pierce buff. Ange has like 3 times or 2.5 times the pierce buff than Miku, and this makes capping defense much easier. So much pierce buff, the skill, the passive. You know, Miku only has like 10% or something like that from the Plane or Play Fire Heaven skill 1. It makes it a little bit more difficult to cap the defense when you use Miku. The third one, also a big one, and it's the main gimmick, and it is Miku's skill 3, the Virtual Concert, as well as Ange's the Capo. They're kinda similar, but also very different. They're similar as in you can act again, you can move again, but the way you move is different. Miku gives you 2 extra turns. Meanwhile, Ange rewinds the turn, allows the DPS to do another hit. The difference between Miku skill 3 and Ange's the Capo is that Miku, the buffs can count down. I'll talk about that in a bit later because the way the buff countdown is pretty strange. But buffs that is cast outside of the Virtual Concert, you count down. So the singular hit during your Virtual Concert is lower than the da capo hit you do with Ange, because Ange rewinds the turn, it keeps all the buffs. So that's the main difference. But that's why people think that 3 turn DPS better for Ange, 2 turn DPS better for Miku, because the extra 2 turns also. But like I said in the beginning of the video, that's not always true, and things are really weird. And if you really want to know which is better, you just have to try both. You just have to use both, see which is better. I kind of hope that I could find a better and more definitive answer to this, but you really just have to test and see which one's better, unfortunately. Because again, it's not as simple as 2 turn, 3 turn DPS. So I'm just going to begin by showing you the results right off the bat. A lot of things to go through. I will talk about each of them, all of this. And as you can see, 2 turn DPS Makoto Yuki better for Ange, 3 turn DPS Haru better for Miku, 3 turn DPS for Akihiko A0 about the same but better for Ange at A6 Aki. Things are weird. Okay, things are quite weird. But yeah, let's talk about Makoto Yuki first. And Ange is better for both A6 and A0. So what is up with that? Why? Why is Ange better? And this one is actually quite easy to understand. It's just because of the full moon stacks. Because with Ange, Makoto Yuki plays differently. Okay, let me show you the A6 rotation first. This is a rotation for A6 Makoto Yuki. So the reason why Ange is better is simple. You get to stack another full moon stack. So you do a skill 3 here, skill 3 here. You have both DG here. So this skill 3 we have like extra full moon stacks. That's why it does more damage. You can see that it's 20 million damage. So this one, that's insane. If you look at Miku, Miku is only 11 plus 14, that's 25. This one 20 plus 12, that's 32. That's already more damage. And that's the reason. It's very, very simple. Then for Miku's rotation, I think I can talk about this now. So you can see that I use only one skill 2 the entire fight. That is a very deliberate choice. The reason is because of the skill amplification from the weapon. So the weapon gives you a skill amplification 10% during the Virtual Concert. And we know that during Virtual Concert, all your skills get activated again. Okay, not all your skills, but like the skills that you use gets activated again. And those skills that get activated will be skill amplified. What that means is if you do a skill 2 here, this skill 2, the damage buff, which is the first sentence here, this damage buff, by default you get it every time when you use skill 2, will get skill amped. And by not using a skill 2 here, this skill 2 will be skill amped until the end. If I use another skill 2 here, it's gonna be weaker. It will override the skill M skill 2. That's why I only use one skill 2. As for rotation itself, you can see that I do have 2 TLGs, but the thing is that they are spread out, right? Miku does give you 2 more turns in the weakened turn, which is very strong actually, but doesn't really work that well with Makoto Yuki compared to Ange, because the TLG is spread out. TLG for this skill 3, TLG for this skill 3. You know, if you look at the Ange, this final skill 3 will have both the TLG, which just gives more damage overall. And then I think I can talk about the rotation itself a little bit. I got it here just to, you know, not kill the boss too fast. And then I use the Nin highlight, which will last until this turn, these 3 turns. And then I use a revolution on the Wind. The reason is because of the crit damage. Dionysus gives crit damage, right? And Wind's passive has no crit damage cap, so you can buff more. The skill 3. Not skill 3, but the Blossom stack stuff. And then I think I already explained the first impression video, but by doing Tarukaja here, the crit damage buff on Dionysus will last until the end. That's just how it works. Because the buffs that you apply during the concert, only the skills, not TLG, not highlight, only the skills, don't count down on your DPS's turn. So Tarukaja crit damage on Dionysus will last until the end, because these 2 turns don't count down. I don't know why that's the case, but it's weird. And again, only works for skills. Tempo swing skill rotation, classic. Then for Makoto Yuki, also nothing much, it's just, you know, just make sure you just do 2 skill 3s during the weakened turn. I'm not really gonna go through Ange's rotation because it's really straightforward and simple, and I don't want this video to get too long. I have a lot of DPS to talk about. So that was with A6 Makoto Yuki. For A0 Makoto Yuki, there's really nothing much to talk about here. Same logic, same reason why Ange is better, because of the skill 3. You can stack 2 full moon stacks. As for the Miku, you can only do 1 TLG for each skill 3. I think the rotation is quite similar. Oh yeah, I did use a skill 3 on twins here because it lasts until the end anyways, which I didn't do for the A6 because I didn't thought about that when I was making this rotation, which I made this rotation first actually before I did the A0. But yeah, the skill 3 skill 2 buff lasted until the end anyways, so I just buffed the twins just so they can do a little bit more damage. So our next DPS, Kasumi. Kasumi favors Miku a lot more here, like that's the highest number actually for the entire testing. And I have to emphasize that this Devour Dreams the weakened state turn, so it's the result for these 3 might not be exactly true outside of Devour Dreams, because Devour Dreams plays differently. It plays quite differently from your typical 6 rotations. So Kasumi team, what's up? So let's just take a quick look. And I think the reason is actually also rather simple why Ange is worse. All you need to do is count the number of highlights Kasumi can do. That's all. For Ange, you can do 2 here and 1 here. That is 3 highlights. Miku, you can do 1, 2, 3, 4. You do 1 extra highlight. I think the reason is just as simple as that. You do 1 extra highlight for Miku. That's why Miku is better for Kasumi. At least for these Devour Dreams. Actually, you know what? I actually think it's going to be better for like 6 turn rotations as well. I think Miku in general, I think it's going to be better Kasumi, despite her being a 3 turn DPS. Now let's just break down the rotation here. So same thing, I do only a skill 2 here because of skill amplification. Then I had to use a Shaosa highlight here. This is very important actually because of how you get the Shaosa stacks. So just a refresh on how Shaosa works. As far better, you get 2 stacks. And every time you use a highlight, you get another stack. And if it's a plus highlight, you get 2 stacks. And you need 3 stacks to use the signature skill, or at least to fully activate the signature skill. Now if you look at the rotation, you get 2 stacks at the start. And also the stacks last for only 2 or 3 turns I think. Yes, on less of 3 turns. You can see that if I get 2 at the start of battle, if I don't use a highlight here, by the time I reach turn 4, the stacks are gone. Because that's for 3 turns, right? 1, 2, 3. So this Shaosa is going to be very, very weak. I don't get the defense debuff, which will really damage my score. But I have to use the Shaosa highlight here. You get 2 stacks. Then the Fire Ice highlight from the twins, you get another stack. So the Shaosa skill does activate everything. And I use it before the break turn so that it will last until the end. Every turn will have the Shaosa, or at least the Shaosa defense debuff. The highlight I believe only works like the next time you use highlight. So that's why I have to refresh again here. And also since Miku skill 3, you know, prevents enemies from moving, you also like, you know, all the debuffs don't count down. So that's very interesting. There's just a lot of things going on for this rotation. My core is also A6 by the way. So there's some A6 core unique things here which you cannot copy unless you have A6 core. Since Kasumi is a 310 DPS, for Devour Dreams, what I did was I stack the buffs here, then I burst here, right? This is the burst turn, first burst, then the second burst. Turn 5, turn 8, they are 3 turns apart. It just works. And the same thing here, I use a revolution on the twins because I already buffed crit damage on this turn. And like I said, the buffs that is applied during concert doesn't count down. So I can revolution the twins, buff the twins crit damage. I also record the damage here. You can see that it's 3.6, 3.2. You see the highest is 3.6, but the highest for Ange is 3.8. So you can see that Ange is actually doing more. But like I said, you do 1 extra highlight and that just changes the overall damage. 3 million is like what? 72 million difference? I believe, yeah, 72 million, because 3 million times 3, which is weakened state, times 8 because of the multiplier. So that's a big difference. The next DPS, we have Akihiko, both A0 and A6. Ange, Miku about the same for A0 and Aki, but Ange is a little bit better than Miku for A6 Aki. And only like 5% is not really a lot, honestly. So why? What's going on? Isn't 310 DPS better for Ange? A clear winner for Ange at least? Why is it so close? Well, if I'm being honest, I don't really know why. I don't know why for this one. It's just strange, man. I don't understand. But I'll just show you the rotations regardless. So this is for Miku, 304 and then 305 from Ange. I don't really know why. If I were to guess, it's most likely because of the extra 2 turns, which gives Akihiko like extra hits of damage. That's probably the reason. Because when you look at damage numbers, the highest high is 8.7, 7.5. Though it also doesn't really make sense because this is only 2 skill 3, this is 3 skill 3, so I also don't really know also. It's very strange. And I even have to use a Thor highlight here just to break or like remove the down point to knock down the enemies, because it's very important for Akihiko to do damage. So very strange stuff I don't really understand. But yeah, going through the rotation, I use turbo highlight here because I can, because it takes like 4 actions, excluding the turn you use the highlight on, to charge the highlight. So this 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can use turbo here, which can buff both this. That's nice. Then Jelanga and Thor to break the down point, to knock down. And you can see that I also stack the out here. Out. Reason is because of knocking down enemies. By the time you do this Q2, all the enemies are like knocked down and they'll regain the down points. So like this is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, including TRG, that's 5 hits to knock down the enemies. And you can see that I use more skill 2. The reason is to get the metal stacks. Metal stacks for the out. So I can out to knock down enemies. And you can also see that I use a TRG before the out. This is intentional. You only get this 8% damage down for 1 turn when you knock down the enemies, or if the enemy is already knocked down. And you do want to knock down the enemies, because according to Luffy.net, damage taken while down weakness is calculated as a separate multiplier and introduced after Sanada, which is Akihiko. So it's basically like final damage. And the great thing about using that with Miku is that it will last until then, because your opponents don't get to move right. And the 8% knockdown is a debuff. Now as for the A6 Akihiko, is where things get a bit interesting, because with Ange, you only do 2 TAGs, but with Miku, you can do 3 TAGs. And I'm pretty sure you need Yukari for this, to do 3 Akihiko TAG. But Ange is a little bit better than Miku, because you do 2 skill 3 plus 1, that's 3 skill 3, same as S0. Miku only does 2 skill 3 from Akihiko. So that's a big damage loss. But honestly, it's not that big of a difference actually. It's like what, 5% just now I showed. And the rotation, I think is about the same, not much changes here. I definitely could have optimized things a bit, maybe Dionysus on turbo, so skill 1 can do more damage. But yeah, just some few minor things here and there. The rotations are not going to be perfect for everything, because I mean, I'm just one guy, I did everything, wrote this myself, took a long time. So there's going to be some things that I missed, but hopefully it's still good enough. Moving on, next DPS, Vishnu. This is Firecracker Rin. And this is where you will see that Miku is better, and the theory of 2 turn DPS better for Miku applies here. So now is where we get the big difference. So what's going on here? So I think this is where the general rule of 2 turn DPS works, because for Firecracker Rin, there's no real gimmick. There's no real like big rotation changes. It's just a very generic 1 melee attack, 1 melee attack. Not much change. You know, I mean Makoto Yuki where you can apply full moon stacks. It's really like straightforward. And since you attack 4 times in melee, the damage becomes a little bit diluted. And if the damage is diluted, Ange will become a bit worse, because Ange is better the stronger you can burst, because of the rewind, the couple. And there's also like debuff. Matoi debuff will last until here, then I reapply Matoi debuff again. The highlight. Meanwhile for this, you'll see that on the last turn, I only have Fire Ice highlight. Meanwhile for this one, I have both Fire Ice highlight and Matoi highlight. That's why it did like 6 million compared to 5.6. And now we go into the rotation. The Miku rotation is different here. It's actually very different. I use a crit rate buff here because I need the crit rate, so I can swap the crit multiplier card. And that's a better choice, because when you look at Miku at Mindscape, the crit damage buff is about 20%. Meanwhile for Revelation card, the main stat is 37.6. So 37.6 and 20%. That's why I use a crit rate here, because I get more crit multiplier from the cards. The same thing also applies here. I do a skill 1 here, then I don't need to use skill 1 anymore, so I get the skill amplification. Then the rotation itself, the twin rotation is a bit different because of the healing, but I heal every single turn. Matoi standard rotation. On the rotation is very interesting though. I'm not using Dionysus because I was using I did like different testing. I treated this as my weaker side. Then I use a Maragi here from Nien. The reason is to charge the highlight here. Typically you need 6 actions to charge, but if you do 4 weakness hits during the 6 actions, you charge in 5 actions. So I use 1, 2, 3, 4 fire moves. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 actions, I get the highlight again. This is very good because on this section, I have both Fire Ice highlight and the Matoi highlight for more damage. Then you will notice something also, I use a Nien here. Why? because that's really the only option I have. When I use a Throne Rebellion here, the Throne will give the damage buff. It's like 15% in max overclock, I think. And I cannot use Throne again because that will overwrite the buff that I did, right? Because you need to burn into inflict element to charge Throne's overclock. And at this time, last turn, I don't have enough charge. So if I use Throne again, I will override the buff. That's why I use Nian instead for like 10% defense debuff. And that's really my only option because my crit rate already max. I have both Rebellion Revolution until the end. Kaja also already used, so Nian is the only option. The second to last, we are almost done. We have Frostgale Mont. This one also the same thing. The regular 2-turn rotation DPS applies here. So similar to Firecracker Rin, the 2-turn DPS thing applies. And the rotation for this one is actually also a bit interesting. So okay, let me show you the Ange rotation first. I don't really have much to say here. It's very standard. Actually, I used this rotation many times already. For Miku, the rotation is very interesting because of the skill 3, the debuffing stuff. You can see that I use a Rakunda here to apply the mark. Then I apply mark again because it will wear off after the turn 7. And then I use the Vishnu here mainly to charge up the follow-up attack here. Because when I use Vishnu here, it will last until the end anyways. So I use Vishnu here again. That's the main reason, just to charge up the follow-up attack. And actually, nothing much to say. It just works. And one final thing is that because of how the stacking and debuffing works, I can do a skill 1 Temper Spin, then I do a skill 3, then I do a skill 2. Then on this hit, it's gonna be my biggest hit, 3 million, which is higher than Ange because I have more buffs. And then I do another skill 1. The reason is because, like I said, buffs that are casted during the concert turns don't count down. So this skill 3 and skill 2 will last until the end. So I can do double skill 1 here to do more damage. And this hit I 150k, so that's free damage. So yeah, again, Miku rotation is very interesting. It really varies for DPS. All DPS will have different rotations, and it's gonna take time to figure out. And when you change the teammates, the rotations can change. Like if I use like, I don't know, replace twins with Marian or something, things will change because I no longer have to highlight here. No longer have highlight here. So 10% highlight change. Then maybe the buffing. Like if I use Marian, maybe I can do a double skill 1 here because the skill 3 buff lasts until the end, right? You definitely want to use the skill 3 buff if you're using Marian on the first turn of concert because that will last until like this turn. So it's very interesting. Things change a lot. Finally, the last one. This one is also Vishnu, same as this, but I'm using a Haru team. And Miku is a little bit better by 8%. So why is that? For this one, I'm also not very sure, if I'm being honest. But I think I can make an educated guess for this one. So the reason I think Haru is a bit better for Miku, I think it's because of extra turns that allows you to use like extra skills. And extra skill 3. I can do decent damage. You can see at 1.6 million. That's pretty nice damage. That's only a little bit less than the gun. And on top of that, your Mako, your Shiva, you can do extra hit as well. And they do like okay each damage. So yeah, it's really strange stuff. So again, like I said, on paper, 2-turn DPS for Miku, 3-turn DPS for Ange, but it's not always true. How to test it yourself to really confirm this. At least when you compare them at like low awareness or the same awareness. As for rotation, this Miku rotation is the most different one compared to everything else. The reason is because we cannot hit for weakness. Vishnu is weak to fire, Haru is a side unit, so I can use the weakness buff. So I can use skill 1 here. The pierce will always be there, because the other one, the skill 2 is the healing, so it's always going to be there. So I have skill 1 here, I have skill 1 here, then I have to use a skill 2 here. I cannot use a skill 1, because if I put everything to skill 1, I don't get this buff, right, this damage buff. So I have to use a skill 2 here for the crit rate instead. Or I can remove like, I only use Rebellion here and then Revolution here. I'll explain that in a bit, but for Miku rotation, you can see that I use Rebellion, then for some reason I use Revolution. Well, I'll explain that in a bit. But for Miku rotation, it has to be like this 2-1-1. I also don't want to put skill 2 at the end here, like I usually do for the skill amplification, right? The reason is because the gun here does speed damage. And I want to buff it up with skill 2. And that's why I have skill 2 here, instead of the usual turn 4. And actually, now that I think about it, I think I can optimize this a bit more. Like maybe using a skill 3 here instead. So that the Hope and Labor card gets applied here, which is a big damage turn. Yeah, I think that's my bet. But yeah, anyways, for one-turn rotation, it's a bit strange. Marakunda, okay. Shiva here, okay. But then Shiva here again. So when you use Shiva here, I don't get the crit rate buff. So you need 3 stacks here. You get 1 stack every turn. Because I use this only after 2 turns, I won't have the crit rate buff. And hence, I use a Revolution to try and substitute the missing crit rate. But the gun can still do a bit of damage. And honestly, I feel like I probably should use the skill 3 here instead. Because the gun damage is even lower than the skill 1. And maybe I should just do skill 1 again. Because it's lower. But yeah, we're not gonna retest this again. And everything else should be kinda generic. Nothing much to say. And one more thing actually, Marakuta will last until the end because of the, skipping the enemy's turn. So that's very nice. Yeah, I think that's about it. So what's the final verdict? Who is better? Well, I don't know. It depends. But I think Miku is gonna be better overall. Maybe a little bit. But again, I think it really depends on DPS, depends on the team, depends on even the persona you use. A lot of stuff depends. So there's really no clear answer on who is really better. The only way to find out who is better is just to test for the DPS and see.